Most men think attraction is about looks, confidence, or even money, but that's only the surface layer. Because in the background of almost every slow-burning relationship, there's something else happening. Something invisible. Something most men never notice until it's already decided their fate in her mind. It's not a game. It's not manipulation. It's a psychological filter. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Women don't always announce it, but they do quietly observe how a man handles certain moments. Not because they want control, but because they're trying to answer one question. Can I respect this man when life gets emotionally unpredictable? And the way you respond in those moments can quietly shift everything. So the real question is, are you being tested right now without even realizing it? Let's go deeper. In this video, you're going to understand what I call the respect filter in relationships. Not in a toxic or manipulative way, but in a psychological sense, rooted in emotional safety, boundaries, and behavioral consistency. We're going to break down the subtle moments where attraction either strengthens or quietly fades, and why it often has nothing to do with what men think it does. This is based on core principles from behavioral psychology, attachment theory, and emotional regulation research, especially how humans unconsciously evaluate reliability and social intelligence in partners. By the end of this video, you won't just see dating differently. You'll start noticing patterns you've probably been blind to for years. And more importantly, you'll understand exactly what builds lasting respect and what quietly destroys it. Let's begin. There's a moment early in dating where something small goes wrong. A delayed reply, a misunderstanding, a change in tone. Imagine a man who immediately overreacts. He sends long messages, asks, "What's wrong?" Maybe even gets defensive or emotional too fast. He's not a bad person, he's just reactive. But psychologically, this is where something subtle happens. The other person starts to unconsciously track emotional stability. Not perfection, stability. In psychology, this connects to emotional regulation and what researchers often refer to as stress response consistency. Humans are wired to assess whether someone becomes unpredictable under mild stress. Because if small things create big emotional reactions, what happens during real problems? The practical shift here is simple but powerful. Pause before you respond. Not to play games, but to regulate yourself. Respond instead of react. A grounded reply, even in discomfort, communicates something deeper than words ever could. I am steady. And that steadiness is often more attractive than any perfectly crafted message. Because attraction is not just about intensity, it's about reliability under emotional pressure. And once this pattern is noticed, it sets the foundation for everything else. Transition. But emotional stability is only the first layer. The next one goes even deeper into how respect is silently shaped. Now let's talk about a situation most men misread completely. She cancels last minute, or she pushes a small request that doesn't sit right with you. Or she crosses a small line, not out of malice but casually, unconsciously. And in that moment, you have a choice. Adjust yourself to avoid discomfort, or calmly hold your boundary. Here's the psychological truth. Boundaries are not about control, they are about signaling self-respect. In attachment theory, people subconsciously assess whether their partner has a stable internal structure, or whether they bend instantly to avoid losing approval. A man who has no boundaries doesn't feel easygoing. He often feels uncertain. And uncertainty reduces respect over time, even if attraction is initially high. Now, the key is not aggression. It's calm clarity. You don't need anger. You don't need long explanations. You simply communicate what works for you and what doesn't. For example, instead of over-explaining disappointment, a simple, "That doesn't really work for me, let's plan it differently next time," carries far more psychological weight. Because it signals internal grounding. And here's where most men miss the shift. Boundaries don't push people away. They reveal who was aligned in the first place. Transition. But even that is not the full picture. Because respect isn't only built in private moments. It's also revealed socially. Let's say you're on a date. Everything between you feels fine. But then the waiter makes a small mistake, or someone interrupts you in traffic, or a stranger is rude. This is where the real observation begins. Not in how you treat her, but how you treat the world around you. Psychologically, this connects to what social cognition researchers call behavioral spillover. The idea that people don't evaluate you in isolated moments. They build a pattern from how you behave across contexts. If a man is respectful only when it benefits him, it doesn't feel like respect. It feels like strategy. But when kindness and composure remain consistent, even when there's no advantage, that creates trust. It signals emotional maturity, social awareness, internal control. And here's something most men underestimate. How you treat people who cannot reward you is often more attractive than how you treat the person you're trying to impress, because it reveals identity, not performance. So the practical takeaway is simple: stay consistent, calm with strangers, respectful in inconvenience, controlled in frustration, not because you're being watched, but because your patterns are always speaking louder than your intentions. Transition. But there's another layer, one that often confuses men the most, and it's about presence, not behavior. A man can be kind, stable, and respectful, and still lose attraction if he becomes too predictable, too available, too quickly. Not because being available is wrong, but because presence gets confused with accessibility. Imagine someone who replies instantly every time, always agrees to meet, always adjusts his schedule, always fills silence. At first, it feels like attention, but over time, psychologically, it reduces emotional tension. And without tension, there is no curiosity. In psychology, this relates to anticipation and reward systems in the brain. Humans are naturally drawn to a balance of consistency and space, not unpredictability in a chaotic sense, but emotional breathing room. Presence means you are fully engaged when you show up, not constantly hovering when you're not needed. It means your life has structure beyond the interaction, goals, focus, priorities. And here's the key distinction. You are not creating distance to manipulate emotion. You are maintaining identity. Because when a man over-prioritizes availability, he unintentionally communicates that his time has no competing value. But when his attention is intentional, it carries weight. Presence is not about scarcity, it's about direction, and direction naturally commands more respect than availability ever will. Let me ask you something most people never consider. If someone observed your behavior for just 1 week, no words, no explanations, only actions, would they consistently see emotional stability, boundaries, respect under pressure, or would they see inconsistency depending on mood, attraction, or outcome? Because here's the uncomfortable reality. Most tests in relationships are not intentional tests at all. They are simply moments where your patterns become visible, and once you see it this way, everything changes. Now let's bring everything together. Emotional stability, boundaries, social behavior, presence. These are not separate tests. They are expressions of one deeper filter. How does this person behave when life is not optimized for them? Because early attraction is often emotional, but long-term respect is behavioral. And respect is what sustains emotional safety over time. When a man is steady, respectful, and intentional, even under mild discomfort, he creates a psychological environment where trust can grow naturally. Not forced, not performed, built. And the opposite is also true. Inconsistency doesn't always end attraction immediately, but it slowly weakens emotional security. And without security, connection becomes fragile. This is why some relationships feel intense but unstable, and others feel calm but deeply strong. The difference is often not chemistry. It's behavioral trust. Here's the deeper truth most men never hear clearly. Respect is not something you demand. And it's not something you perform for in isolated moments. It is something you earn through repetition of behavior when no one is forcing you to be your best self. And in relationships, people are not just responding to your words. They are responding to the emotional environment you create. Do you create calm or confusion? Stability or unpredictability? Presence or pressure? Because over time, love alone is not enough to sustain connection. What sustains it is the feeling of being emotionally safe with someone who is also self-directed and grounded. And when a man develops that internal structure, not to impress anyone, but to live aligned with himself, something shifts naturally. He stops chasing validation. He stops overreacting. He stops trying to force outcomes. And ironically, that's often when respect deepens the most. Not because he changed who he is for someone else, but because he finally became consistent in who he already was. And that is the part no one can fake long-term. If this resonated with you, you don't need to overhaul your personality. That's not the point. The real shift is awareness, seeing where emotional reactions, lack of boundaries, or over-availability might be shaping your outcomes more than you realized. Because once you see it, you can adjust it. Calmly, naturally, without force. I'm curious, what part of this stood out to you the most? Was it emotional stability, boundaries, or the idea of presence over availability? Drop it in the comments. And in the next video, we'll go deeper into something even more misunderstood. Why women sometimes pull away right when things start going well, and what it actually means psychologically. Until then, remember this: you don't get respect by asking for it. You get it by becoming someone whose behavior,